Welcome everyone to Monday Match Analysis. I'm Gill Gross. The ATP Finals semifinals are set, and we're joined by Hugh Clark, author of the newsletter Thread of Order, to preview Carlos Alcaraz versus Felix Auger-Aliassime and Jannik Sinner versus Alex de Minaur. This is our second full ATP Finals podcast of the week. Part one was back on Tuesday. We talked about the group stage matches up to that point. This time around, I'm going to start by catching up on some of at least my takeaways from the matches we've seen since then, and then I'll bring in Hugh to talk about our semifinalists specifically. Hugh is so good at getting down to the why of things, so it'll be fun to hear his thoughts on some of the things that I've been observing. Let's begin with the year-end number one storyline, which has already been settled, with Alcaraz going 3-0 in the group stage, even though Jannik Sinner did as well. I said before the tournament, and I've talked about this, honestly, a lot over the last few weeks, and maybe even you can go back further. I always keep a close eye on year-end number one. I think in a rivalry like Sinner and Alcaraz's, it's a big prize at the end of the year, and it's one of the major ways in which they're going to measure up. Like it would have been last year when majors were 2-2 and Alcaraz had a head-to-head lead, but if he looked at himself in the mirror, he might have felt okay, but certainly he would have looked at the rankings points situation and thought, all right, I kind of got beat this year, right? All things considered, I got beat this year. And I think this year, Alcaraz won't feel that way. He'll feel really good about all the work he did to get to this point, even with Sinner missing 3 months' time with the suspension, which is a topic that I don't think we need to delve into right now. I think once the season is over and the dust settles on this year-end championship event, we will be able to kind of take stock of Alcaraz's season, Sinner's season, and talk about these bigger topics and sort of how we should look at Jannik's body of work, considering that very unconventional pause in the action that he experienced from February through April. But we don't have to do that now. I do want to clarify one other thing, because when I said, look, Sinner became number one after Paris, and I said, guys, it's not really important. Like, doesn't matter much. What matters is year-end number one. And the rebuttal to that was, wait a second, Gill, weeks at number one matters. Total number of weeks at number one matters. Let me just set the record straight. I totally agree with that. Of course, your total number of weeks at number one matters in the grand scheme of things. Like, cumulatively, that's very important. But my job as someone who is providing tennis commentary is to, in this case, frame the importance of the present. And in the present, you had year-end number one up in the air on the line with a 3-4 week showdown, Alcaraz versus Sinner going toe-to-toe for that particular prize, which is a very meaningful one. And one that, it's one of the ways we take stock and measure up the best players in the sport. It's part of their legacy. And that was on the line in the immediacy. Whereas weeks at number one, they're both going to be number one for hundreds and hundreds of weeks over the course of their careers. So the point is that one week individually, not that important. It's just one out of hundreds. That's the point. Okay. Now let's get to some of the specifics of the tennis. Let's start with Jannik Sinner. Still hasn't dropped a set. That is now 8 straight matches at the ATP Finals in which he's won in straight sets. According to Telegrammi di Tennis on X, it would be the second longest streak of all time, behind Ivan Lendl, who won 11 in a row from 86 to 87. And if you'll recall last year when Sinner won the ATP Finals title without dropping a set, he was the first to do so since Lendl did it back in 1986. The big takeaway has been Jannik Sinner's serve. He has not been broken. But the serve itself has been lights out. It's been the best. I have never seen Jannik Sinner serve this well. I almost called him Jannik server, and honestly, if he keeps this up, we might have to change it to that. He already leads the tour in hold percentage, but I've spent a lot of time trying to statistically and analytically hammer home that the reason he leads the tour in hold percentage is not because of his serve, and that there's still a lot of improvement relative to his peers that could be available to Sinner in the serve, and this has just been next level stuff. Tennis Insights obviously has its serve quality number, which takes everything into account, tries to just synthesize it. And it has the best 3 serving performances of Jannik Sinner's career at this event. Registered a 9.3 against Zverev, a 9.2 against Shelton, and an 8.9 against Felix Auger-Aliassime. I reiterate, the 3 best serve quality performances of Jannik Sinner's career. The serving that we've seen from Sinner, full stop, it's the best he's ever done. I've documented the percentage going up, and it's gone up drastically, but this is just another level. And that is a scary, scary proposition when you are already looking at a dude without an elite serve who has held over 90% of his service games for the last couple of years. All right. There's one other thing that stood out about Sinner, which is that in every single matchup that I've watched him play in this ATP Finals round robin, he has been able to ruthlessly expose the weak point of his opponent. And it's very much reminded me of Novak Djokovic. And there's 2 ingredients here. You need awareness, and then you need skill set. So the skill set aspect of it is, in order to play whatever pattern is necessary to basically customize your rally tactics for the opponent, you've got to be able to hit every ground stroke. So the backhand has to be able to go in any direction. And Sinner has that Djokovician quality. He can kind of go down the line whenever he wants. And if the matchup calls for that, he can do it. Well, guess what? Against Zverev, that's what the matchup calls for. Against Shelton, the lefty, that's what the matchup calls for. Take a ton of backhands down the line. Against Felix, other way around. Other way around. Now we're going into the ad court relentlessly as much as possible. And now I've got the advantage of these courtside analytics, courtside advantage program, where I'm getting to see Sinner's rally ball placement over the course of a match. And it has been a Picasso painting every single time. FAA against Felix, okay, 55% of Sinner ground strokes landed in Auger-Aliassime's backhand third. Against Zverev, 72% of Sinner's backhands landed middle or down the line into Zverev's forehand. Whereas usually, Sinner's over 50% cross court. Against Zverev, scrap that. No cross court. Not happening. Not hitting that shot. It's not the right shot against this guy. Against Shelton, now we've got a lefty, but we want to mostly play his backhand. 56% of Sinner's total ground strokes landed outer third on Shelton's backhand side. How did Sinner do that? He took 43% of his backhands down the line to only 24% cross court. The reason that doesn't equal 100 is because he's going to hit some down the middle, and that's not going to register in either category. 43% down the line, 24% cross court. A lot of players just don't have the ability to do that. Their backhand is not good enough to go down the line that often. They would be missing left and right. It would be a disaster. Sinner can do it, but the way he's faced 3 opponents, none of them are really perfectly balanced. and he has just snuffed out exactly what he needs to do, has been really, really impressive. One thing on Shelton before we kind of go on to some other stuff. Shelton is the best server I've ever seen where you still wonder sometimes why he isn't serving better. There's something that happens with Ben's serve that I don't see as often with other great servers, which is that once in a while, he'll hit a nothing burger. You're like, what was that serve? What happened there? And I think the reason for that is Shelton is not always hitting his spots, and he's often trying to take speed off of his serve and hitting the kick or the slow slice. So when he hits an off-speed serve and misses his spot, it ends up being one of those serves that I'm talking about where you just go like, huh? That was not a big serve. That was a nothing burger. And let's compare Shelton to, I think, the guys who he should be compared to. Milos Raonic, Hubert Hurkacz, Nick Kyrgios. I don't recall watching those guys play and hit a lot of... I wouldn't see a lot of first serves from them where I'd be like, whoa, what was that? That serve had nothing. The reason you don't see it with those guys is because the approach is just way more simplified. What are they trying to do? They're trying to hit big serves into corners. And even if they miss their spot, at least it's still a big serve. Or in the case of some of these guys, they just don't really miss their spots as often as Shelton. But it's something that is a quirk with Shelton that I think they need to look at. I mean, either you can try to just get more consistent with the spot serving, which I'm sure is going to be a goal for them, and it's already improved from where Shelton was at points in his career, or simplify the approach, hit bigger serves more often. We know that Shelton is capable of that. He's averaging usually below 125 miles per hour on his first serve, and he could be averaging 129 easy. It's just a matter of how he wants to serve. So that's all on Shelton. Really didn't love his first couple matches. He did play better against Sinner, so there was some improvement there, but it wasn't enough. The last semifinal spot came down to Zverev and Felix. What I want to say about this match is it is painful to watch Zverev lose this way over and over and over again. It's just, you cringe watching it. You just do. Zverev forehand speed tells the story once again. He averaged 82 miles per hour on his forehand in the first 8 games of this match. First 9 games, actually. First 9 games of this match, he averaged 82 miles per hour. At 4-5, it went down to 77. The set point, the forehand was terrible on the set point. In the tiebreak, Zverev's forehand was even slower, on average, 74 miles per hour. At 4-5, in the second set tiebreak, his forehand was horrible. He hit 2 weak ones and then dumped one into the net, decelerating. Match point, decelerated, and missed a forehand that just didn't dip down into the court because he didn't have enough spin, because he didn't swing hard at the ball, because there's no confidence and there's no conviction. And that was the match once again. I mean, it's a close match. Felix served incredibly clutch, made a lot of first serves from down break point. Second set was nervous on both sides of the net, but it's just the same thing. It's a guy who can hit his forehand until there's pressure, and then he can't hit his forehand. That's all. That's all I've got. The match in which Alcaraz actually clinched number 1 was against Lorenzo Musetti. I didn't give Lorenzo much of a chance coming into that match, given the trend of the head-to-head, the conditions in general, and the fatigue factor with Musetti seemingly fighting his legs in all 3 of his round-robin matches and having no days off in between winning the 3-setter that he did against Minaur and then playing Alcaraz. Unless I'm messing that up. I don't think he had a day off. I thought Musetti did have to make some concessions to try to protect his legs. He came forward more often than I normally see when he had chances to attack. But I just don't feel like he closes the net that well. And one thing that Alcaraz will always take advantage of is somebody who doesn't close the net that well. Because the way Carlos, especially when he just is stretched out on his backhand, the way he'll just take a continental grip, drop the ball short in the court, and make you volley from your shoelace is basically automatic. On the 4-5 set, the 4-5 game in the first set where Musetti got broken, he was in 3 times. He should have lost all 3 points. So all 3 times he's hitting a low volley. Some of them didn't have to be so low if he just closed harder, but it was a good job by Alcaraz. Carlos actually missed an easy forehand passing shot to keep Musetti alive in the set, but then he ended up breaking later on. The other big factor in this match was Alcaraz's forehand. It was a bull ram. It was the biggest shot on the court by far. And I think in this matchup, it's just a little bit too easy for Alcaraz to earn time. Time on the ball. You give Carlos time to hit forehands, and you are just probably dead. I'm sorry. I don't know how else to put it. You are probably dead. But Musetti chips a lot of returns, especially on the one-handed backhand. He chipped 40% of his returns in this match. And it's hard to tell a guy not to chip returns. Oftentimes it's the great play. It's the right play to make returns. Musetti's such a good defender. I want him to make returns and give his legs a chance. But when he's playing Carlos Alcaraz and chipping returns, it's a guy who just generates off that +1, even off of a good chip return. He generates off that +1 so darn well. It's still a disadvantage for Musetti that he has to block returns. Then you have the court position. And Musetti just gets a little bit lax on court position. And I don't think that is overcomable or acceptable in these conditions. It's too hard to run and defend against the offensive firepower of Alcaraz. I think you just have to mind your court position a little bit more. Carlos was getting the better of the serve-return dynamic. He was starting far more points with an advantage, especially once he got his return together. He really didn't return well in the first 8 or so games of the match. Once he got the return together, he was starting a lot of the points on favorable terms and then kind of getting forward. And one thing with Alcaraz, 18 out of 19 at the net in this match. Musetti, I've always just said it's very necessary to get to the net against Lorenzo Musetti if you want to finish against his defense. You've just got to get in. And Alcaraz, of course, is willing to do that. He wins 18 out of 19. He's been ridiculous in the round-robin matches at the net. He's won 85% of his net points. Crazy, crazy number. The volleys are just absolute perfection. And then the other thing that I want to talk about with Hugh is the defense. Alcaraz's steal score in his round-robin matches is 41% against elite players in offense-friendly conditions. That number has no business being that high. So we'll talk about it with Hugh. First, a quick reminder, I will be doing a live video Q&A at the conclusion of Sunday's championship match. It is exclusive to those who join my community on Tribe by going to gillgross.tribechat.com. Tribe is a community that brings tennis fans together in a group chat-like setting. We're breaking down matches, we're sharing content, we're doing trivia. So it's a really cool platform, not just for tennis, but for all sort of niche interests where you can kind of connect with people in an environment that's much less toxic and more carefully curated than most social media or all social media platforms out there. So download the Tribe app, search for tennis, join the Q&A with Gill Gross Tribe, or just go to the link, gillgross.tribechat.com. So you will get exclusive access to my live video Q&A on Sunday. Without further ado, here's Hugh Clark. We're joined once again by Hugh Clark, author of the great newsletter Thread of Order, returning to Monday Match Analysis. Hugh, thanks for coming back on.
Always a pleasure, Gill. Good to be here.
Absolutely. So a couple of things that I didn't get to in the open. I did not talk about the de Minaur Fritz match. To me, Hugh, it was just such a mental affair. It was just all sort of managing nerves. And de Minaur thought he was eliminated. He did not think he had a chance to be in the semis. And Fritz, it looked as if he had put the weight of the world on his shoulders, thinking, I know de Minaur hasn't beaten top 10 players. I know I have to win this. I know I'm defending finalist points, and just played as tight a match as I've seen him play in a while.
Yeah, and I think you said it. I don't know if it was after that match. You said you can't kill a man who's already been killed in terms of like de Minaur's mentality coming into this with the record and thinking he probably wouldn't be able to qualify. And everything was firing. The serve was firing. The aggression was dialed right up. And when you're playing with that kind of freedom, you can play pretty special sometimes when you've got that burden off your shoulders.
We'll talk more about de Minaur when we preview the semifinals. Let's shelve that for a moment. Um, I looked at Shelton's rally distribution against Felix, and it was evenly spread between going at FAA's forehand and going at FAA's backhand. And I did an episode of The Point on that. Want to get your perspective on this. Is there any excuse for that, or is that just a miss, an error tactically?
To me it's a miss because he's Felix is one of those guys I put Tsitsipas in that category where the weapon is so good, like especially when he's confident like now, the forehand's so good and the backhand by tour standards is just not even maybe it's even below average that the strategy should be quite clear. Maybe not, every ball to the backhand, but Sin has shown that in the last few matches against Felix, he's been very heavily preferenced in targeting the backhand until he really got the ball to pull the trigger on into the forehand. So yeah, I was a bit surprised, and I'm not sure, what the reasoning for that was, but yeah,
Other than, of course, Shelton's not a guy who's going to hit a ton of backhands down the line. So he gets stuck into that pattern. And then it's kind of like, we say backhand jail. The reason it's jail is because it's hard to go down the line for most players. What was like really kind of the what are you doing moments is when he had forehands in the middle or even forehands from the ad side of the court, and he was going down the line with
yeah.
those where it's like you can definitely, if you wanted to go that direction, you could. Like we know that for a fact. And oftentimes he was just passing up the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, I don't know if it was him thinking if I go to the forehand, it opens the backhand up. I think Felix is moving better than I can ever remember. Like he's defending his forehand exceptionally well. His scramble and his steal score, whatever that kind of stuff is looking to me like it's better than ever. So maybe that was playing into it. But yeah, I definitely think, you need to really bully that side a little more, especially if you're a lefty like Shelton with the forehand.
Yeah. Um, and then, we're going quickly through these round robins, and then we're going to spend more time sort of buckling down on the players who are participating in the semifinals. But dramatic situation with Zverev taking on Felix for a spot in the semifinals. And I mean, you and I, Hugh, have talked about Zverev's forehand. We had an in-depth conversation about it. Uh, I think last time you came on the podcast. And we're just kind of looking at the same match happening many times over. I talked about in the open how Zverev's forehand speed just plummeted on the big points. I'm guessing you saw the same thing. What else did you see in that match?
Well, it was interesting. So I wrote an article recently about Felix since the US Open. He's been able to take his backhand down the line maybe 6, 7% more than the first half of the season. And it's been a mixture of slicing more and also even flattening his two-hander out. And against someone like Zverev, in the first set especially, he looked so clear in his tactic, Felix, in terms of if I slice line, even a floating slice, I don't think I'm going to get hurt. And there was a couple of slices there that Zverev, you know, you'd think would punish the ball, and he netted them. I don't know if it's a combination of nerves. You know, I've never liked his forehand. I think technically it's suspect, and yeah, I think in the second set I was actually like screaming into the TV because Felix sort of went away from the slice, and I was like, oh, he had so many moments. I was like, just go slice line, because Zverev looked tight this whole match to me. It was actually quite a strange Zverev performance, I would say, to the point where Felix missed some opportunities early in the second. You thought, oh, if he doesn't capitalize on this set, that could get mentally quite difficult. Um, but yeah, Felix being able to get out of backhand jail with someone like Zverev, because Zverev's forehand is not going to punish him. That was key, I think, being able to slice line. And then FAA served very well, especially in big moments. And I heard the commentary say actually in Zverev's last two matches, out of the 11 break points, Sinner and Felix combined, this was midway through the second, they'd gone 8 times to the forehand. And so if you're Zverev, you've got to be sitting on that. But that's also, you know, just a mental hurdle. And when people know uh, where to go to you in big moments, you know.
Right. I mean, the backhand return is dynamite, as we see over and over again when he plays Ben Shelton. And the backhand defense is dynamite. In a baseline situation, when you attack that backhand, he gets to neutral so well. But on the forehand, and there were some big moments against Sinner and some big moments against Felix here. You look at the tie break, for example, or even the set point in the first set, when Zverev's running right and a little bit rushed on the forehand, he makes it enough, but that's where you get that short ball, middle of the court that ends up getting attacked. But I couldn't agree with you more about Felix's chip. I wrote it in the first set as well, how effective it was. You did start to see it less and less, but you know, bringing Sasha inside the court. And then the other thing that I like about it is he's not really going to miss it very often. And to
Mm.
me, if you're Felix and you're finding ways for the backhand to just be more consistent, you're doing something right. And that's been my biggest thing. Okay, so he's going down the line more. That's certainly interesting to me. But most of the time when I'm watching these matches, I'm just commending Felix for staying consistent on his two-hander.
Well, and his errors, that's the other thing actually I didn't mention. He's going down the line more and he's missing less. So his average unforced errors since the US Open has been about 5 per match, and before the US Open, and historically, like past couple seasons, it's been more like 9 errors. So missing less, getting out of back-end jail more, as you say, that's a huge win-win for FAA, and I think it's a huge reason why he's sort of had this big resurgence in the last part of the season here.
Agreed. So now let's move it forward and talk a little bit about how that looks against Carlos Alcaraz. And I don't necessarily, from a backhand standpoint, I'm not necessarily sure it looks good. And this is where you talk about the levels to the game, because against most players, it's like Felix, you're not missing your backhand. Okay, you're golden. You're probably going to win a ton of matches this way. But then he goes up against Alcaraz, and we might need more from that shot than just not to miss. We might need some quality. And I don't think he's going to be able to slice the ball against Carlos. I think Alcaraz is up there with like Rafa in terms of don't slice against him. Um, and I also think the passing shots can be an issue when Carlos is just finding a way in on Felix's backhand. I still don't love the pass. Do you share that view? Like how do you see Felix's backhand holding up in a matchup like that, even the best version of it?
Yeah, it's interesting. One guy who's been able to really kill Felix's ability to go line is Sinner recently. They've played a few times, and his ability when the ball is coming with that much heat to change direction because of his technique is very much diminished. And then he does find himself getting predictable and cross court. And then, when you're predictable to someone like Sinner and Alcaraz, they're going to go line. They're going to be able to bring way more firepower because they can get in position early. So Carlos to me looks like he's been hitting his backhand exceptionally well in some of the parts I've been seeing, especially against Minaur. And he's, hitting it hard enough where I think, yeah, it's going to be tough to slice. It's going to be tough to change for Felix. And if you're giving, you know, predictable patterns to Carlos, that's going to be very tough. He's probably the best set piece guy off his forehand from the ad court. So it's going to be interesting to see what Felix does try and do. Like, does he just take more risk and take it down the line with Tosu more, or does he hope Carlos has a bad backhand day, which we've all seen as possible as well? He's much more up and down on that wing, I think, than someone like Sinner, who is pretty disciplined and is pretty consistent with just trading cross, cross, cross. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see what happens in that particular little battle, the backhand to backhand.
Felix, for the record, when he played Zverev earlier today, he did go cross more than 50% of the time and basically never hits it up the middle, which I find interesting. When you look at Felix's backhand spray chart, you don't get a lot of balls middle. You get actually a lot short cross. Like he rolls over the ball and it goes
Yeah.
short cross, or he'll try to take it line, but he's never, almost never intentionally hitting a backhand up in the middle. But I think if you're Alcaraz, it's like, I think it's going to be a backhand winner like showcase for Carlos potentially, just stepping in and being the guy who's actually willing to blast off of that particular cross court pattern.
Yeah, especially because FA's backhand, you mentioned it, it's quite spinny. Like it's quite a spin-oriented, heavy two-hander. It doesn't really go through the court. And Carlos's backhand loves it up there. He's got a very compact swing and he's very good at flattening it out. And so it's kind of like when he gets second serves, his crush and rush ability is exceptional. I think if Felix gives it too much height and has it landing short, yeah, we could see Carlos taking it on early and he's never afraid to wait for an opportunity to do something like that.
Yeah. Of course, Felix is going to serve well. He's going to hit the forehand huge. He's going to come at you. I think he's coming forward with confidence. What I want to ask you about when it comes to Alcaraz, and I'm very excited to ask you about this because I think it's been absolutely massive. Carlos Alcaraz has never looked more difficult to rush than he does right now. Both wings. I think early on in his career, if you brought a lot of pace, played really, really fast, there were times it looked like Alcaraz hated it. And he would get erratic off of it. He would overhit off of it. He would miss-hit off of it. And now it's rock solid for the most part, even in the fastest conditions against big hitters. I think it's so important. And we're going to see if it's a Sinner Alcaraz final, we're going to see it tested at the highest level. Um, what has Alcaraz done to become so much more difficult to rush?
Well, since he first came on tour, 4 years ago, 5 years ago now, his elbow, the way he sets up for the forehand, the elbow has gotten much lower. He used to take his elbow and his hand above his right shoulder. And, this helps him create a lot of space to accelerate the racket, but it takes more time. So it would really be difficult to get that undone against a very fast incoming shot. Now, 2025 Alcaraz, his hand and his elbow rarely get above the shoulder. He's keeping it much lower. He's still, bringing a lot of heat. And so now when he's moving to his right or when he's faced with a fast incoming ball, he's just looks so much less rushed and he's able to counter punch back so much more effectively. And we've seen that at the US Open final right from the start. He was sitting on Sinner's attacks to that wing when he broke in the opening game, I think. And ever since then, it's looked like, Tokyo looked like absolute fire. Here he's looked very special at times as well. So I'm looking forward to, yeah, Felix is going to really test that out, I think, and it's going to be interesting to see, if Carlos keeps that up. But the backhand as well, a couple of years ago, he took the hands quite high in that traditional power position, and he's gone sometimes what I thought was too compact, where he not only dropped the hands, but he really dropped the racket head. So everything was very level in that Kyrgios bunty sort of style. And then, on the clay, he sort of brought back a little bit more of a power position. So, yeah, even the way his backhand is now is very difficult to rush. And I think he's never looked better off the ground, in my opinion.
So basically both wings, the hands have gotten lower.
Yeah, the hand's gotten, but they're getting at ball level quicker, kind of like what Sinner's doing, and actually kind of what the tour in general is sort of moving towards. Unless you're a deep court position counterpuncher like a Zverev, Musetti, Medvedev, these guys can afford, or they're forced to stand deeper because their swings, vice versa. But yeah, most of the guys who are trying to attack now are starting to lower the swings, and you're seeing it with Fonseca on the backhand now already as well. So, yeah, I think it's kind of what you have to do if you want to be an attacking player in 2025 now. You got to get kind of compact.
Just because the game is sped up so much.
Yeah, it's sped up so much, and if you have long swings but you want to hold the baseline, you're going to be tagged as someone to rush or a particular wing to rush, you know. And I think that's part of FAA's problem on his backhand is the racket head and the hands get quite high, and then the racket head also gets quite low. So he's got a long way for his racket head to travel before he's pulling it through, and that's what can create those timing issues sometimes.
Right. That's good stuff. I think that'll basically cover it on Alcaraz Felix, but I just want to say informationally, it's a 4-3 head-to-head. It's a for Alcaraz. I think it's a pretty misleading 4-3 as Felix won their first three meetings. One of them was a retirement. It was Alcaraz's first real breakthrough at the US Open in a quarterfinal match. He retired to send Felix to his first ever major semifinal. And then after Alcaraz won the US Open title in 2022, he basically had a big old hangover that fall, and Felix beat him twice. Since then, four times in a row for Carlos.
But they've
But
been on slow surfaces, those last four.
okay, good call,
Yeah.
good balance.
I think it's interesting we're going back indoors now on a faster because I think there was Olympics on clay, there was Roland Garros on clay, there was Indian Wells, which is, bouncy. So yeah, it's going to be interesting in that this is their first quick, low bouncing meeting again in a while. But yeah, I'm with you. I'm leaning Carlos.
Yeah, FAA, foreign player. These are serving friendly conditions. Felix can outserve Alcaraz. Carlos's serve has been, I think there have been some good sets and some bad sets this tournament. I think the rest of his game's been consistent for the most part, but that's where it's been a little bit up and down. So Sinner is serving the lights out. I talked about it a little bit in the Open, but let's get into the technical side of that. You pointed out very early on in one of your newsletters that one of your posts, nobody knows what to call them, right? Haven't you said that before?
I call it a post just because
A
Substack
post.
calls it a post, but I don't know, a
Okay.
blog. I don't know. I write about it. It's writing.
Writing. Okay. So you've written about uh, potentially a deeper elbow position for Jannik Sinner. And then this week, Jim Courier, who I believe has gotten this from having conversations with people in the know, that's what I think, has talked about a little bit of an adjustment in toss location. Sinner bringing it a little bit more over the head. So if he let the ball drop, it would land on the top of his head, as opposed to more out to the right, more inside the court. And the other thing I would add is Vodniotsi has discussed dialing in the rhythm. I haven't been able to detect a change in rhythm, but it might just be as simple as we're just trying to get it perfect and drill it. So those are kind of the three things. We've seen the percentage shoot up, but this isn't just about the percentage, I think, at the year-end championship so far. The damage has been crazy. The precision has been crazy. It's been the best I've ever seen him serve.
Yeah, I mean, I can only see obviously a back view from the match footage I get, so it's tough for me to really discern what's happening technically all the time. But yeah, I did notice in Beijing, the right elbow, the hitting elbow, very early on in the backswing was getting into like a deep position that before was only getting there very late in his swing, and it looked like the chest was coiling a little bit more. He was getting a little bit more coil in his upper body. I didn't notice the toss stuff at that time. But it's very possible if you're turning earlier and now your tossing arm is going, more along the baseline rather than out in front, your arc or your toss arc will go naturally over your head more. So that could be related as well. I did a little digging on his serve numbers actually, and since the US Open, his deuce side T serve is up 10% on his 2024 average. So he's hitting T way more, hitting body less, which sort of buys into your idea that he's just looking more accurate with it. So I don't know if he's actually going T more, or if he's just not leaking to the body as much. But yeah, the serve has looked phenomenal since the US Open.
And he has not sacrificed pace. It's just as big, which is, I think, what you would worry about. I mean, the reason why players and coaches sometimes really like a toss that goes into the court, far into the court, is obviously you can get some of that forward leg drive moving in the direction that you're trying to hit the ball. And also I think if you're trying to catch it, if you're trying to catch the ball straight on and hit a flat serve, which is ultimately going to maximize your miles per hour, I've always found it's an easier toss location to hit it from when it's inside the court. You can kind of go out at the ball. But what's ended up happening is it just seems like Sinner has gotten more comfortable hitting spots at this point. And also, I think, like, I wonder if it's a mentality thing, because if you talk to Jannik in 2022, he probably would have been like, yeah, my serve's not big enough. I'm averaging 115 miles per hour. That's not good enough. I need to get it bigger. I need to get it bigger. I need to get it bigger. And then maybe it's as simple as just a little bit of a shift here where he's like, wait, I've gotten it bigger. I need to get more in.
Yeah, and I don't think his win percentage on first serve has changed from last year. It's still hovering around 80%. But yeah, if you're adding 6% to your 2024 first serve percentage, like the last few months, it's been at 68% or something. I mean, that's making it incredibly difficult for your opponents when you're already the, number one player in the world in 2024. So yeah, I mean, the serve has looked, yeah, rhythmic. He's hitting spots. He looks confident. And indoors, that's just adds to the whole problem that Jannik Sinner is at the moment.
Already the number one hold server in the world.
Yeah.
But you and I both feel like there's been gains that are available to him in that area.
Yeah, especially, that's been a talking point in his matchup with Alcaraz as well, where his serve numbers have been pretty poor. So that's probably been the area of his game that, early on the forehand backhand power was always there, and the serve was sort of the thing that was getting tweaked a lot and was sort of seen as a weakness considering his height and like the length that his body is. And so it seems like now he's really filling into that potential a lot more.
He, in that particular rivalry, I think the body types are something to consider. Sinner is 6'5" and lanky, and Carlos is 6 feet flat, basically. And Sinner will never be as quick as Carlos, and Carlos will never be as tall as Jannik. So it's important that Jannik serves well.
Yeah, 100%.
Um, let's go to some de Minaur head-to-head stuff. I was looking through some stats, Hugh. Obviously, this is one of the infamous head-to-heads. It's 12-0 Sinner. De Minaur has put up a better effort in a couple of their more recent meetings, but I had the ability through courtside advantage to look at some stats across their 12 meetings. And here's what stood out to me. De Minaur's in attack percentage is 17%. Tour average is 24%. So he's basically never getting on offense. Baseline points won. Sinner 56%. Against Alex de Minaur, that is a huge number. Net points won. Demon is down at 63%, whereas he's actually the tour leader in net points won on average at 73%. So you can't just be like, losing from the baseline, just why don't you come in? Nope, that number is way down. First serve points won. This is, I guess, the most like objective, digestible stat that tells you this has been a huge problem for de Minaur. His first serve win rate is 57% against Jannik Sinner across 12 meetings.
Yeah, I mean it makes for tough reading if you're an Alex de Minaur fan, and as an Aussie, it's a tough one to turn around. You know, Alex, I watch highlights of some of their points from Beijing and stuff, and like some of the rallies are just PlayStation because Alex refuses to concede an inch from the baseline, and I think it's just a problem because when we talk about what can give Sinner problems, it's variation. It's bublik drop shots and power serving. It's the height and angles that Alcaraz can bring to the backhand slice of Dimitrov. And in Alex de Minaur, you pretty much get a wall of nothing too fast, nothing too spinny. And you can just, if you're Jannik Sinner, you're going to find your rhythm at some point in that match. You're going to find your rhythm. And I know Alex has tried to use a bit of the backhand slice, but he's not bringing the spin or the control of like a Dimitrov in that department. And even if he's going bigger, he's not bringing the power of an Alcaraz or a Bublik or something like that. So he's really in a tough spot in this head to head. I think these conditions is when Alex is at his best. Quicker indoor
Agreed.
hard, where he can take it early. His flat shots get a bit more juice, but yeah, it's just a very tough ask at the moment. You talk about his net percentage getting killed. 63% when you're looking at all the other stats is actually pretty good. So if I was his coach, I'd be, bringing more of that free swinging mentality. I think second serves, he's got to be super aggressive. Sinner hasn't been using the body serve much. Maybe that's because he hasn't, on second serves, he hasn't faced someone of Demon's aggression this week. But yeah, I think on second serves, he's got to be hyper aggressive. He's got to come forwards, try and mix it up a little bit. I also think, you know, the backhand to backhand trade is the lesser of two bad options. He wants to avoid giving Sinner forehands as much as possible, I think. I think the set he took in Beijing, he got a huge number of his backhands cross court. He hit like hardly any backhands in line. He just made it an attritional backhand war. And so, I mean, if you're just talking baseline tactics, yeah, I mean, it's not like a good tactic because you're giving backhands to one of the best backhands in the world. But I'd rather that than giving one of the best forehands in the world that kind of rhythm as well.
I agree. And Alex is one of those guys, basically indestructible on the backhand side defensively. So when players force errors against Alex, and I actually think this happens quite often because it's like impossible to hit a winner against him. Usually it's
Mm,
hard into the forehand,
yeah.
attack into the forehand, and then you get a miss there. And that's often at least how you can find a finish from the back, which is so hard. But Sinner's backhand down the line has been so disruptive, I think for Ben, for Zverev. I think he's going to hit a bunch of them again against De Minaur, and that shot backs Alex up, makes him move on the diagonal, and usually just I feel like breaks open rallies for Sinner because I agree with you. De Minaur wants to go backhand to backhand and kind of hug the baseline, and that's his way of sort of playing fast and maybe getting up to the net. And I would be surprised if Sinner is as willing to just go stay in the cross court compared to kind of what he did against Beijing. Beijing, it was an interesting match because it did look like a drill half the time. It looked
Mm,
like they were just like, let's go toe to toe. Let's strike.
yeah. I mean, and that's what I was saying. Like, Demonor can like make matches look like ping pong because he is facing like Sinner and Alcaraz who are pummeling the ball, and he doesn't concede an inch from the baseline. He just takes on the half volley. Um, Yeah, I mean, Sinner's line backhand to me has been like such a huge shot for him this year. You talk about the Wimbledon final, I thought it was instrumental. And I think when he's not used it, that's when he's sort of been a bit kind of, that's like some sort of chink in his armor if he's being a little predictable against a free swinging opponent. So I would think he's going to take it early and set the tone and try and get out of that pattern a little early. But yeah, it's going to be interesting because Demonor, I suspect, is going to come in with nothing to lose. And, he was injecting a lot of pace into some of these cross-court backhands against Fritz the other night. So it's going to be interesting to see if Sin actually has to weather a bit of like hyper aggression early on, or if, Demonor is going to see if he can, just lock it down for a few games early. That's going to be interesting. But yeah, it just seems like Demonor doesn't have enough options or enough extremes in his game in terms of pace or variation to ultimately win this match.
I think that's a great point about Alex's ball more generally, is that it does not really hit the extremes that might bother Sinner. But one thing it does do is stay low. So I would
Yeah.
just follow up with you on that. Clearly that hasn't bothered Jannik, but can we talk about how Jannik deals with a low ball and some of the things he does that I guess makes him well suited for that?
You mean with his backhand or just generally?
I think
Because
I
I
think
mean,
just generally, yeah.
well,
I'm
I mean,
curious
yeah.
what your take is on it.
With his backhand, like FAA, he gets quite a bit of drop sometimes. Like he can get quite under the ball. So this is why he can post like huge spin, and because of the length of his backswing, he can post huge speed and spin. So it's kind of like people talk about it being a lefty forehand. if you look at it in slow motion, it gets so deep in the slot position, like so far, the racket head gets so far behind him that he's building huge racket head speed. And so, yeah, he can hit from low balls quite a bullying ball. Against a lot of players, if you're Dan Evans or a very flat hitter and you keep it low, you can kind of force guys to just neutral ball back their backhand, whereas Sinner he can really tee off on a low ball like it's a forehand. And so he's a little unique in that respect on the backhand side, in that it's kind of difficult to, go low and slow and stall him. Like you could maybe stall Djokovic a bit more, or Medvedev a bit more or Zverev a bit more on that side. And then on the forehand, like the way he sets up on the forehand, he has like that next gen sort of outside whippy takeback. So his racket head and hand is quite low. So he is always ready for something low and fast to the forehand side. And he actually makes an adjustment when it goes high. When the ball's high, that's when he looks more modern with his racket head and his setup. So he's kind of showing the model of maybe where the game's going.
I love that answer. It's not what I thought you were going to say. So
Okay.
I will shout out his legs.
Oh yeah.
And if you're like showing a young player how to keep like a strong athletic base in setting up for the ball, everything from sort of his balance always being slightly forward, never over his skis, but just a little bit, I guess, positive, I would call his body weight. And on the most simple shots, there's never laziness in him
Mm.
getting down to the ball and using the ground. Never ever, and it's just every single shot, you feel like he is putting in the work to lower his center of gravity to whatever extent necessary on the ball.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, his base is freakishly good, and on his forehand, he's freakishly good at getting on the front foot. Like I can't remember a guy who stood on the baseline. Like Wawrinka used to find the front foot a lot, but he kind of would stand a couple meters back. Federer would find the front foot a lot, but yeah, Sinner, he can find his left leg on his forehand so often, and I think it just gives him such a solid base to drive the ball and be as aggressive as he is. And yeah, I mean, it's a great point. Everyone talks about that skiing background being probably instrumental in having that kind of wide low base. Djokovic, another guy who skied. So yeah, I mean, the legs feed the wolf. He's a killer.
Yeah. All right, let's end on this. Do you see any significant not significant, scratch that word. Do you see any difference in Alcaraz and Sinner's overall level in the lead up to a potential clash in this final?
Um, I don't think so. I mean, I think I'm giving. Last time I gave one of these guys an edge, I got roasted in your comments, but I was right though.
You
But
were right. It was
uh,
Wimbledon? Was it
it's
Wimbledon?
Wimbledon. Yeah, I was leaning Sinner pre-Wimbledon, but yeah, I haven't seen. I think both guys are playing well, and
Agreed.
I'm think. Look, it looks to me like if they play well, they'll be tough to beat. But yeah, if they were to play in a final, um, we're in Turin, we're in indoors. Um, I'm leaning just because of the way Sinner has been serving, and that's been so instrumental in their head-to-head. I think in Alcaraz coming out on top so often. I would be leaning um, Sinner, but it's so tight because Alcaraz serves great now. On his day, like that US Open performance was great serving, and the forehand is not rushable now. So the margins are as thin as ever, I think, in this head-to-head across the surfaces. But because they're both so great, and because we're in Turin, we're in Italy, I would be leaning Sinner.
Yeah, and this is another one of those events. They both go 3-0 in the group, and everybody just looks very, very far away from both of them. I will agree with you and just say this. If Sinner serves at the level he's served at in these conditions, I just don't think he's losing. I just think that's too overwhelming. Now, is it a guarantee that he's going to keep serving this well? No. But just based off of the serving that we've seen and these server friendly conditions, I think it would be a bridge too far. And it would be huge for Jannik, obviously, to get a win over Carlos before the season ends. So
I
we
think
will
it's more
see.
important. I think it's more important for Jannik to get a win, just given the US Open, and this is his court and his conditions going to the Australian Open. So in that sense, I think there's a little more pressure on him if they were to meet, but that would be an interesting dynamic.
That's a great point, and I'd rather not have pressure. So that might be one check in the box for Alcaraz, because it would feel very big for Jannik. That's a great point. We'll see if we get it. I think we're both leaning that we will. Hugh, thanks for coming on.
Pleasure, Gill. Thanks.
All right, Thread of Order. Subscribe to Hugh's newsletter.